one of the examples that we talk about in episode 1 that I find so fascinating was a woman who was blind and had a near-death experience. And she explained like what she couldn't see when she came back. Her ring, the color of her hair, what was going on around her. I mean, she had a complete, vivid description of it, never having had sight before.
Jeffrey Long talks about this. Yeah. Also, he has some cases sight. Of these. Yeah. And people who had never had vision describing things that they oftentimes don't even have words for because they've never, quote, seen them. Like, what is that? Right.
Well, and to your point, when she came back and she said, it's so cool, though, that you can see in front of you and behind you and up. And he's like, no, you can't. You can only see forward.
She thought everybody can, oh my God.
And she's like, what do you mean you can only see forward? That's not true. I could see everywhere. And it was so cool. And he's like, no, like that's not a thing. Like we don't see everywhere. And then, but that he was like, what was so fascinating about that piece of information is that that's how a lot of near-death experiencers talk about their vision.
And the only way to explain that is that there are not two eyeballs that are looking forward and have, this kind of view that's roughly, I don't know how many degrees, I can't remember what it is, but the notion that seeing is being.
Right.
That existing in whatever plane of consciousness allows you the ability to have access to all of the information, which is not only visual, it's not only auditory, there's something spiritual.
Right.
There's something that you're seeing and experiencing that can only be described as existing in some divine way, right?
Well, and a lot of these people will talk about being able to move at the speed of thought. Like, how cool is that?
And that answers come as quickly as you ask them. Like, time is irrelevant.
Yeah. And one of the things that was fascinating is like we looked way back into like ancient accounts, and it was like, what was the best way to verify near-death experience 2,000 years ago? And it would be someone who had this near-death experience came back and was like, oh, Frank, whoever's dead. And it'd be like, that's probably not a name from back then, but whatever. And then, it would take 2 weeks upon months to often get news of something like that. And then, like, of course, like 2 weeks later, they'd find out, yes, this person had died like 4 weeks before, and there's no way they would have known. So verifying like who else was in, this other place.
Right. I mean, Jesus, the most famous example of someone. I mean, but when you think about the language that is used to describe these things, that was about 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of cross-cultural references with a ton of similarity. What did you discover in that research about ancient near-death experiences?
A lot of religious beliefs that started all around the world had the same common themes. And then what was sort of discovered by Gregory Shushan, who had studied past life religion, started finding that there was near-death experience accounts in all these religions as well. And the reason that the accounts of what the afterlife was like or this other place was like were so similar was because people were saying, well, I've gone there and come back again. And that the near-death experiences around the world were very similar in accounts, regardless of what religion, what background, what continent you were living in, that you left your body. There was usually some sort of guide there. You had some sort of life review. You were told you had to go back, but you didn't want to. This body and this place is not the win. It's not where you want to go. And often seeing loved ones, and then returning. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It also is significant, and this is something Brian Murarescu talks about, and we spoke about with him in the Immortality Key, the secret history of the religion with no name. There were also long-standing traditions where meditative practices, transcendental practices were engaged that let you experience death before death. And he talks about this in some of the foundations of Western civilization as we know it, but there were very similar experiences described of leaving your body. It's ego death, right? And many people experience it with psychedelics. But there's a place, right? And there seems that there's many ways to get there.
The notion that all these religions are either brought on or have their sense of the afterlife informed by near-death experiences, for me, is very comforting because it removes the institution of religion and shows these common threads that are linking them to some kind of truth. Because it doesn't matter the story if it doesn't resonate with people. Like you can say, well, this part of religion doesn't make sense, or this institution has caused an enormous amount of
Or
damage.
I don't like those rules.
Or those rules don't make sense.
Yeah.
But things don't become this popular and strike a chord with this number of people unless there's a universality in it that has some resonance of a truth to it beyond what we can explain.
This is where I will say that also it's possible that, and this is something that came up in season 1 a lot, it's also possible that there's some collective experience that we are describing a certain way. I think season 2, it sounds like, is really taking that next level dive to say, what does it look like to sort of clinically drill down and see what can we actually understand about a larger truth.
Right.
Like the mechanism or the...
Sure. The depth. I mean, yeah.
And I think the thing that we keep stumbling across over and over again is like, oh, when you go way, way back, all of this was common knowledge. It's like we've forgotten. And like, especially in our plant episode, which was at first I'm like, what is this episode going to be about? Like, it feels like we need to do it, but what the heck? Like, plants communicate. Like, it feels tricky. And then, of course, there was a non-speaker in Connecticut who, as soon as she started spelling, was able to tell you, this is what's going on with you. This is the herb you need. You need to have astragalus, some Chinese herb that, like, how would the family know about that? They didn't. So she is able to diagnose someone with a very accurate herb diagnosis. You know, you need to take this tea or have stinging nettles and hot water or whatever. And it's the proper medicinal treatment for whatever is ailing the person. And it's proof of authorship. It's proof of telepathy or because she's like, I can communicate with plants easily. I can hear them. And at one point, her sister was the one helping spell with her when I would send the questions. And one of the questions like, well, how do you know what plant? And she goes, well, plants communicate. It's more like a smoke around you. It's so soft and so gentle and so there. But she's like, I'll know who lit the fire, like where the message is coming from, what plant. And she's like, they're so loving. They're so unconditionally caring for us. Like you think about plants really work together. They move to give each other sun. They don't try to take the sun away like we do. And so she had a lot to say about plant communication. But one of the questions we started asking, like, is she actually communicating with the plant, or is the plant some sort of like receptor of some like informational field that's like almost like bing, bing, and then like, can I do this? I do this, but it's like reflecting this information from like a greater consciousness to us, or is she telepathically picking up on? This young non-speaker has Cuban roots, and she said that she communicates a lot with her ancestors in Cuba and stuff. Is she knowing the knowledge? Because her abuela, we interviewed for this too, and her abuela was like, oh yeah, like there a lot of this, like, you know, we revered in my culture growing up and that type of thing. And it's like, or is it you're telepathically grabbing the information from someone else? Like, how is this happening? But when we went back into like some of the ancient cultures and stuff, there's so many people who talked about, no, the plant told me to do this with it, or I could talk to the plants and say, I know you have poison XYZ, but I need to reach in here to grab this. So please don't make my skin itch. And just a lot of examples of this telepathic communication between plants and humans.
It makes sense to me.
This makes sense to you that plants speak to humans.
They would speak in a very soft way. They wouldn't be as loud as an animal would be.
Right. That's what makes sense to you.
That makes total sense. Although I think maybe poisonous plants speak differently. Maybe, could be wrong. Also, I think the question of where that information is coming from, is it a larger consciousness system facilitating the healing of a human being, and the plant is just a messenger or tool for the larger consciousness system? Or do plants have almost more agency or care over human nature? Because you would imagine maybe they're angry at us for like chopping them down and pulling them out of our garden.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
No.
Maybe they don't carry that.
I have been asking that a lot with the communication with animals and plants, and no one seems mad at us, which I'm like, how are they not mad at us?
I would be annoyed
Everyone
at
should
us.
be, all the things should be mad at us.
I mean, I have a spiritual answer to that, which is that in a place other than this one, if everything is suffused with love, meaning if that's sort of like the universal language, I mean, I'm going out on a limb here, but if that is the universal language, it's a place beyond our human understanding of what is possible in terms of tone.
Right.
And in terms of like, it's not that there's good and bad, it just kind of is.
Right.
Right? Like and that from people who have NDEs that we've spoken to, that is such a relief.
Yes.
And that is why
Ah,
the
it is
decision to
relief.
come back
It's so hard.
is so hard. Because
Yeah.
what would it, and I had to get chills on the right side of my skull, what would it be like to be in a place where you don't have to make those judgments, right? Or
Yeah.
people always say like, well, what about Hitler? Where is he? Right? People love to bring up these
Yeah.
human, judgment questions. You can't imagine when Buddha Betty said that even her abusers, even the people who abused her, the understanding she had of what they had to experience to hurt, it was next level. It was the definition of forgiveness and acceptance.